So that's it then. The 45th President of the United States is, at least for now, a convicted felon. Right, but for what? Bombing countries into oblivion as innocent American citizens get caught in the crossfire whilst eating in a small cafe? Sexual misconduct in the Oval Office? Mishandling classified documents he had no right to have and carelessly keeping them in his garage next to his Corvette? Or maybe having 30,000 classified emails on a private server and then destroying all evidence when caught red-handed with bleach bit and hammers? Nope. Turns out he's supposed to have misclassified a 130 grand payment for a porn star's NDA to get her to shut up about an affair they supposedly had, but which both parties directly deny themselves ever took place.
Okay.
With sentencing not scheduled till July 11th, and what is days before the RNC National Convention, which I'm sure is just a pure coincidence and not at all a devious strategy to keep him from being able to accept the official party nomination, Donald Trump now faces a range of potential penalties, from a hefty fine and probation to a maximum of 4 years in state prison on each count. Last year, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg indicted Trump for, quote, falsifying New York business records in order to conceal damaging information and unlawful activity from American voters before and after the 2016 election. Though I'm still not quite sure how this was even possible, given falsifying business records were simply misdemeanors at best, but were then upgraded to a felony because reasons. And I don't say that purely sarcastically for comedic effect. Reasons is literally the excuse that lead prosecutor DA Alvin Bragg basically gave as to how they were even able to bring this to court on literal trumped-up charges. Apparently, in order to have escalated to felonies, the initial incidents needed to have been in service to or covering up for a previous crime, something which Bragg has yet to reveal, even through the majority calls of the court case, and has basically just said, lol, trust me bro, because it doesn't seem to exist, just like the supposed PP tape or the clip of Trump using the N-word. And I don't mean nationalist. So as far as I can make out, and do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong of course, but in 2016, an ex-adult entertainer and professional sexing slut, Stormy Daniels, was paid 130 grand by Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to sign a non-disclosure agreement about her alleged sexual encounters with the orange billionaire circa 2006. But for some bizarre reason, Cohen obtained a line of credit on his own home to make the payment himself just before the election. And after the election, Trump's company then casually reimbursed Cohen for fees owed. However, as far as I can make out, the confusion and controversy here is whether these constituted campaign contributions and whether Trump knowingly filed these without saying so to hide the intent of the payments, or whether he indeed had no clue and just assumed they were genuine lawyer fees. Oh no, hardly a crime in the century, even if true, but there you go. Because whilst hush money payments are not inherently illegal, and indeed have been issued by many other politicians through the years, not least old horn dog Billy Clinton, Cohen apparently admitted that he broke laws by making these payments because it was in fact in an effort to hide unflattering information before the 2016 election, and therefore technically campaign finances that were not recorded as such. But Trump claims not to have known about any of this because Cohen took it upon himself to pay off Stormy, and thereby presumably looking to put himself in the big man's good graces and for a place in his administration or some shit. A convicted liar and serial perjurer himself, I'm not really sure why Mikey Boy was even allowed to be a witness for the jury in the first place. But for pure comedy purposes alone, it was totally worth it, given he hilariously confessed on cross-examination to have lied to his own wife about the money, and had in fact been stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from Trump's organisations for ages. Because he testified on his last day in open court that he actually pocketed most of the money that was meant for a technology firm that did most of the work for Trump's company. Yep, you heard that right. Donald Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen, and now star witness for the prosecution, admitted on the stand to stealing about $30,000 from the Trump organisation after hiring a tech firm called Redfinch for $50,000. Cohen, however, only paid them about 20 grand despite invoicing the Trump organisation for the full 50, and Cohen never paid back the remainder of the balance to Redfinch and instead pocketing the sweet $30,000 for himself.
Nice.
He later tried to justify stealing from his former boss's company as a type of, quote, self-help, because he was apparently pretty butthurt that Trump allegedly shorted him on his bonus years before. But Cohen's former attorney Robert Costello crucially testified that Cohen repeatedly told him that Trump didn't have any knowledge of any hush money payments. He was basically just casually signing off what he thought was standard lawyer fees for general attorney services. a claim the prosecution thought was false, despite Trump knowing so much about the internal finances of his own company that he didn't even know he was being stolen from by his own contractor. So, to recap, Trump was charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records. The misdemeanors were then upgraded to felonies because prosecutors accused him of falsifying said business records, but with the intent to commit or conceal another crime connected to his 2016 campaign, and despite not telling us what that other crime is supposed to be. And he was totally convicted of all this, despite Cohen's own lawyer testifying Trump didn't know what these payments were even for, and clearly had no knowledge of what Cohen was doing, given he had been nicking all his money behind his back. Man, that all seems totally above board. And why wouldn't it be? I mean, it can't be a politically motivated hit job with such pathetic low-level charges that have already passed the statute of limitations and wouldn't dare be brought against anyone else in the city, right? And it's not like the judge's own daughter is a Democrat activist who raised money from the trial whilst her father presided over it, while said judge, who clearly despised the defendant of his own case based on the way he talked to the defence team compared to prosecutors, also gave jury instructions stating they didn't even have to unanimously agree on the existence of the initial underlying crime in order to convict him of trying to cover it up. What? And it's certainly not like the lead prosecutor was a politician who literally ran on a campaign to nail Trump, and just like Letitia James did in the civil fraud case, by the way, but by all means don't you dare notice a pattern emerging here.
He built his wealth off the backs of New Yorkers. We need to focus on Donald Trump and his abuses. We need to follow his money. Tell this president and every other individual that no one is above the law.
Individuals who care about, again, going after Donald Trump as illegitimate governor president.
I'm running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
I say one name, Donald Trump.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass.
I mean, let's be honest. This is all they really wanted out of this public sham and shameless act of lawfare. And of course the ability to label him a convicted felon all the way up until election day. Because this was all brought to light back in Trump's first term. So they had years to bring this to court, yet suspiciously chose the middle of an election year when their leading political opponent was sky high in the polls. And at the end of the day, all the trial exposed was that Trump was a victim of grand larceny because he was too trusting of his colleagues and is now going to jail for it, and over an affair which wasn't even proven to have occurred in the first place. Lol, sounds legit. But anyway, where do we go from here? I mean, what precedent does this all set for previous and future presidents going forward? Personally, I find it ludicrous how Biden's own special investigator conceded he also mishandled classified documents he had no right to have as VP, but was simply too senile to stand up to a court process. So it's best to just let him get away with it, continue to be president, and just shut up about it already. And not to mention the international collusion of the Steele dossier hoax intended to frame a sitting president as a Russian spy. And after Obama spent months illegally spying on Trump's campaign in a scandal that makes Watergate look like a family picnic. But yet nobody was charged with any felonies for any of those. But Trump marks a legal expense as a legal expense and gets 34 felonies? Now, and they expect us to have any trust in the American system going forward, and like it isn't completely weaponized against a particular political side? I mean, I remember when they explicitly told us that he was a Russian agent for 4 years, and that Putin fella helped install him illegitimately into office. But after years of investigations at the taxpayers' expense, they eventually found no proof of that. So they've instead now finally got him on a glorified bookkeeping charge, and for simply being too trusting of a lawyer.
Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Shit, I'm saying.
And of course, the Dems have already proven that they will stop at nothing to prevent this guy from freely and fairly winning a second term. I mean, the 2024 election is already compromised and completely tainted, given they've interfered with the leading opponent's campaign for months on end, and even tried to fascistically remove him from ballots based on tribal accusations and unproven insurrection narratives. Why they're so scared of an ex-game show host with a ludicrous tan and bad haircut, and who is so authoritarian in nature he checks notes, refused to send in the National Guard when actual insurrectionists were burning down cities for 6 months, left lockdowns and vax mandate policies down to the states, and also left office without incident, I don't know. It just shows how desperate Dems are to retain power at all costs. I mean, if you're at a point where you have to try to imprison your leading political opponent to try and stop him from even running against you, and also have to wheel out an old and busted Hollywood actor to cheerlead for you outside the courthouse, then I'd say you're in a pretty panicked position, pal. And hopefully, this redonkulous conviction can finally put to bed all the farcical tinfoil hat blue and on conspiracy theories, that Trump is somehow part of the deep state and totally in on the utter destruction of his own brand, property empire, personal wealth and reputational legacy? Because that's a ludicrous thing to say, after seeing them go this far out of their way to destroy him if he's secretly working with them somehow. And as Geiger Capital tweets, the first felony conviction of a former US president wasn't for the Iraq or Afghanistan wars, illegal CIA coups, drone striking weddings or spying on Americans. It was all because Trump misclassified a $130,000 payment for a porn star's NDA, which tells you everything you need to know. And let's not forget, the guy whose administration finally took down the leader of a global elite pedo ring, despite the last 3 presidents having 30 years between them to do so, but just let them all get away with it and also probably joined them, was totally convicted before even anyone on the client list of said global elite pedo ring, which also tells you everything you need to know. And regardless, we've seen it all firsthand to play out in real time. As ex-hot chick Rob Schneider reminds us, everything the Democrats warned Trump would do, they indeed have done themselves in the course of the last 4 years. From doing whatever it takes to stay in power, to political show trials of political opponents, arresting political opponents, censoring opposing views, and of course, starting even more wars. And let's also not forget either, that when Trump won in 2016 and in the days just before his initial inauguration, he openly declined to prosecute Hillary Clinton as a sign of good faith in order to try and heal national tensions. But when Biden won, his DOJ arrested 1,500 plus January 6 protesters and some which hadn't even stepped foot inside the Capitol, nor were even in DC on that day. And soon began creating charges against Trump with party-aligned activist cronies in NYC and Atlanta. And what does this guy have to say for himself when he represents a party literally called the Democratic Party and whose supporters keep crying about fascists overseas locking up political opponents in kangaroo courts? Well, of course, he just gaslights us all in pretending he's defending democracy and then giving a malevolent smirk when told Trump blames him for his blatant legal persecutions. 81 million votes, folks. The most popular president in history. But I think ultimately this is going to backfire rather bigly. I mean, yeah, it may eventually be overturned on appeal, supposing an NYC appeals court somehow aren't infected with TDS and are remotely reasonable or sane, and though it's going to take a good while for that, even if it does happen. But luckily, I think we can already see the public fallout happening in real time, with even normies and centre-left anti-Trump people now coming over to his side, and apparently donated so much dough overnight that it totally crashed Trump's servers. Because the entire proceedings and outcome has essentially woken up and totally radicalised even Silicon Valley tech millionaires who were previously leftists. And worse, the whole thing has now made Trump an underdog and social martyr, and has effectively changed the theme of the election from old man Biden versus old man Trump to freedom fighter Trump versus the tyrannical authoritarian establishment who are totally out to get all of us, which I think will turn out to be a rather costly mistake for these dopes in the long run. I mean, if we're at a point where Piers Morgan is calling it out as a witch hunt, leftist streamer and long-time Trump-hater Destiny's on the verge of turning, and even CNN were questioning the validity of the case as it was ongoing, then I think we can all agree it's probably not going to work out too well in November for poor Dems. Well, if they can resist the urge to expel him from ballots and further fortify democracy, that is. You know, some say the modern Rubicon was totally crossed with this verdict. But I feel like that was crossed last year, when an ex-POTUS was indicted and his mugshot taken unnecessarily in a national humiliation ritual by his political opponents at the beginning of an election cycle. Well, for one thing, Dems can now never cry about Putin and other fascist world leaders totally imprisoning their political opponents, because America just lost any kind of moral high ground it ever bloody had. And of course, 34 felony counts of paying off his side hoe is just the beginning of Trump's year of court chaos, because we've still got the Georgia racketeering case and Jack Smith's classified documents suit in Florida to go, which carry far more serious penalties if convicted, and which he now inevitably will be if they can send him down for unknowingly letting the guy who was secretly stealing from him handle his literal affairs. Though the upside to all this is that he's probably going to be even more minted after all those, given the guy raised an estimated 35 to 50 mil overnight and based on this trial alone. I mean, how many more bloody bags is he going to earn from all these other cases? Because at this rate, this fella's totally going to go to jail a billionaire and then come out a trillionaire. So, all in all, at least we can now have total faith in a justice system what bases decisions on habitual liars, thieves and perjurers, and with judges who tells juries they don't even need to agree on the underlying crime to convict the guy, and who also refuses perfectly reasonable requests to move the trial to a neutral venue and maybe not have it take place in a D+20 enemy territory filled with the most people who hates the defendant's guts and are certainly not and never can be a jury of his peers? Seriously? That's fucking nuts, son. I mean, what would happen if red state DAs decided to bring misdemeanor charges that are already past the statute of limitations and that are artificially inflated felonies against corrupt Democrats in an election year, and then prosecute them in front of Republican juries that already hate them before the trial even begins, and slapped him with a gag order so he can't even defend himself whilst neck deep in Republican heartlands the vote majority ours? No, cities would be burning down within an hour and they'd be totally calling Trump a fascist again. No! But anyway, what say you? Are you more determined than ever to vote for this orange fella, what seems to be the most persecuted man since that bloke what walked on water that one time? Or were you perhaps on the fence, but now totally turned off of voting for a man with 11 times more felonies than Al friggin' Capone? Whatever your feelings on the subject, at least we're living in interesting times. And how incredible is it to watch history play out right in front of your eyes? Even if it is previously unprecedented, utterly horrifying, and proper worrying for the future of the free world.